All right, so you're allowed.
We are at Wednesday, the 2nd of April, and we have the auditor's office in Senate Transportation. And if you could give us your name, rank, and serial number, we would welcome your testimony.
Well, Tim Ash, Deputy State Auditor, that's a more complicated question because my colleague here actually is a veteran. So when you say rank and serial number, he may actually have it.
No longer. Jonathan Kingston, Audit Manager.
So why don't I just briefly explain the backstory of why you received material from us that led to the meeting. So in spring of 23, we completed and issued an audit on the AOT paving program. That audit looked largely at the extent to which paving projects that were appropriated in the transportation program were being completed on time and on schedule, and the extent to which AOT was using performance measures and other analytical tools to determine whether there were trends that would allow them to reflect and improve their performance. What many people don't really fully understand how the auditor's office works in terms of producing an audit, and I won't get into that now, other than to say that it's an exhaustive process that Jonathan and people he supervises spend a lot of time and look at all the documentation. But after we issue an audit, we then follow up 1 year after and then 3 years after to see that recommendations that have been made have actually been implemented. And we've released these follow-up documents to basically show that not only did we come up with recommendations, but we're making sure that they don't just show up in a report and drop off, but that they follow up. So we have a fairly straightforward little slide presentation, which I'm gonna rip through because that way we can just focus on any questions you have. But again, the backstory is the audit was issued in March of 23. We came in here and gave a brief presentation shortly after that. And I think in fact the committee made a couple slight adjustments to transportation statute as a result of that. I think it was just at the end of January that we did the first year follow-up. I'm going to let you guys ask questions after I just quickly explain that this is one of the exhibits from the report. In general, we found that a lot of the projects were taking longer than had been anticipated, and that the cost had often been significantly greater than what had originally been proposed. Now, there may be very good explanations for that. A project could have additional mileage, so it's going to be paving a lot more roadway, and therefore the cost goes up. It could be that the project takes longer because certain federal monies were going to become available, so it made sense to wait a year. So it's not the past judgment about each instance where you see a project that takes longer or costs more, but rather to flag that when it's happening, it's important to know why that's occurring.
How many projects were put out to bid? The bids came in so much higher than they had estimated. So the project gets moved out in that period of time.
I only recall one project in our selection. So we looked at 14 projects and we looked at projects that were 2 million or greater, so the more complex paving projects. And I only recall one from that selection where there was an issue where the bids came in different.
And the years that these projects occurred, Jonathan?
We looked at projects that were completed in, I believe it was 2022. It may have been 2021, but I believe that.
So these would have been, preceding some of the, more recent inflationary issues that we've been hearing about. Do you want to describe the 3 recommendations that we made?
Sure. So we first made a recommendation that VTrans develop and implement a process to consistently record why the reasons for cost and schedule deviations. And there's a statutory requirement that if a project is delayed because they need the funding, they shift the funding to another project, they're required by statute to inform you.
It's the 10G report.
It's not listed in the 10G report, but it is a statutory requirement.
So you're supposed to be notified just
Because there's no,
by other means.
yeah, there's no dollar threshold limit. The 10G reports generally have a dollar threshold limit. This one is just, we didn't do this year because we had to shift the funding. And so that was basically, record the reasons and then inform you when as required by law. Then the other two recommendations were just develop the performance measures, one for cost and then one for schedule, and report them to both the legislature and the public.
We'll show you an example of a state that does this quite well, that would, I think, serve the legislature well. The reason why some of this, we'll give a particular example to show why the legislature being notified of some of these lags in the phases of a project can be really important. So the Killington Stockbridge, I think Senator White is in your district. But, Killington,
Stockbridge Park.
yeah, Stockbridge Partnership. Why I know that, I don't know. Maybe Senator McCormick, redistricting, whatever. Anyways, this project, this project, which has still not had actual construction occur, and Jeremy will probably have insights into this, but you'll see, and again, this is not to pass judgment, but rather to explain that these projects can sometimes sit in the transportation program for quite a long time, and that unless it's flagged for some reason, it's easy to just go from year to year without recalling that you appropriated funds for some purpose, and then they actually weren't spent. And then you see the project show up the next year. And if you don't keep looking back to previous transportation programs, you lose sight of what's really been going on with this thing. So this project, it actually initiated before FY13, but you'll see here that funds were they were expecting to spend construction funds as early as FY13. That's the estimated budget here. You see the 1.6 million up there. So then you'll see that by FY22, so years later, still construction had not occurred. Fast forward, even last year, the committee appropriated 3 million for construction, but there's still been no construction. So far in individual transportation programs, if you added up the amount that's actually been appropriated for the construction project, the paving part, it's been 9.6 million, but there's actually not been any paving done. It's all been in the design phase. The other piece that really is critical about why the timing of being informed about these things is important is that as I go back, you'll see the original project estimate for this schedule of FY15 was about $12 million. You get to about 22, it's about 15 million. That holds until FY23. And now we're starting to see that big jump that we assume is a result of the various cost pressures that are coming on. So there may be valid reasons, and you can ask AOT for the specific reasons about why this has occurred. But one of the consequences of a project being pushed out for whatever reason is that then you're subject to variables that sometimes are external. In this case, I presume that there's a lot of external factors driving more than doubling of the price of the project. So it is one of the reasons why it's really critical. And this is just sort of a summary of legislative action and then the sort of delayed furtherance of those actions.
I asked the question about what I had a local project in our area, and what the agency is reporting to us is between 2021 and 23, over a 3 budget year period, that their construction costs went up 40%. So as an overlay to that, that would these numbers make total sense in with that increase that they had during that period of time. I had a project at home that got put off 2 years. It was a $12 million project, and it got put off because the bids came in this was in the top 10, but we were like 8th or 9th. And the bids all came in. The agency's been far outstripped by its estimates versus what.
So it's pushed more projects.
So it's
farther out.
pushed more projects farther out into this piece.
Right. And so in this case, one of the key pieces is that the 10G report, this didn't show up until FY25.
Yeah.
So one of our strong encouragements of the committee is to find a way to get more timely notification when projects aren't moving forward for whatever reason. That doesn't mean that it's about criticizing AOT or being punitive, but rather if you don't know that if it's not being flagged for you, I mean, I've been in your shoes, obviously. If you have too many pieces of too many puzzles to be able to connect all the dots yourselves. And so the extent to which it's made easy for you by simple notification that some of these things are happening is really important. This is an example, this is not project specific, but this is an example that was in our audit from the Virginia Department of Transportation, which we think is actually a very useful way of summarizing the work. I don't know that this was specific to the paving department at the Virginia Department of Transportation. They do it for, I think, every discipline that has construction funds.
I believe so.
Yeah. But they have a pretty simple, they call it the development phase is basically everything up until signing the contract, and then delivery is the construction phase. And when you click in there, if you go on their site, you click on it, it pops down, and then you see all the projects and what's going on with them in real time. Now that may be too much effort and not worth the investment of time. I suspect AOT would say, oh my God, then we're going to have to do an IT project and it's going to cause, all this stuff. Just this alone allows you to engage with AOT in their annual presentations here in the off season and say, why are we seeing this? They might say the bids are coming in because the price of, asphalt is going through the roof. They may say federal funds got cut. We didn't anticipate it, or there was a crisis because of flooding over here. It allows you to then ask some of those questions in a way that's a little bit, it gives you a prompt that's a little bit better and allows the agency to self-reflect.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am very jealous of the Virginia legislature for having access to this kind of information. What I was surprised by with your presentation before you presented like the actual report was, I thought this was in the 10G report. So I thought we got more of this information already and were being notified when things went over cost. But it sounds like there's almost, loophole's not the right word, but there's almost this missed, if it gains over a period of years, then it isn't showing up, even if it kind of in that year period would have hit the 10G report. So I do think we need to expand that to some extent. And the V-Transparency website, which is very helpful for me. I don't know if you reviewed that through your reporting, but having something as simple as added information to that website, maybe it's not as bold as this, but just understanding a bit more of the cost pressures associated with each of those projects would be helpful, because it is hard to explain individual circumstances, and it can create this perception that money is just free flowing, moving. There's not really there's no rhyme or reason that cost is going up, or why is this over here more than that and this over here is less. So I just wanted to reflect on that.
You're exactly right. The 10G report catches the projects that the 10G report says have to be caught, but it doesn't tell you about the ones that aren't included. And when I presented in the Senate Institutions Committee, the Agency of Digital Services has something that looks more like this. Now they're only managing the project management wing of the ADS only manages maybe 20 to 25 projects at a time, roughly.
Yeah.
So we're talking a different scale than what AOT has, but tools like this are being used by Vermont state government. It's just a matter of deploying them in ways that are truly helpful to you all and to the agency.
I mean, at least for very large projects. I mean, like if a project is more than $10 million, I feel like it's a reasonable request to understand a little more graphically where it falls.
Wendy,
Oh,
So did something prompt this audit?
Yeah, so we do this risk assessment process. And we looked at a bunch of different transportation programs. The paving budget is significant. It's over 100 million every year. So it's a larger area. And we were noticing that some things were on the transportation program for a long time. And when something first comes on the transportation program, as you know, it has the estimated completion date. And we were looking at things that, well, we're way past their the original expected completion date. The example that Tim just showed, which you were briefed on just the other week, it's a project that they intend to start construction on this year, was when they first briefed it to the legislature, was intended to be done in 2016, complete in 2016. So, but I want to say just a few things real quick. So what we found in our audit, there's two pieces to a project. There's this design phase, which we call preliminary engineering, and then the construction phase. What we found is they didn't have any kind of performance measures for the preliminary engineering phase. And that's where these projects, like the one Tim just showed, tends to miss cost and schedule targets. When it comes to the construction phase, what we found, they do have some performance measures. They have a performance measure. They want to make sure that they get the job out to bid at the time that they thought it would be bid. And when they're looking at the bids coming in, they have a performance measure that says we want our bids to be a certain amount of them to be within a certain estimate. Where I'm going with this is once they actually start the construction, things come in on cost and on time, the most part of them. So but again, that's the value of performance measures when you have areas that you look at and it identifies, it's easier to focus on it. The other nice thing about Virginia versus the 10G reports. So the 10G reports, there was a change last year. So it informs you of some things that have had more of a cost increase since the original estimate. But the 10G report informs you of the bad.
Yeah.
There's nothing here to inform you of the successes. Whereas Virginia, you can look at it and you can see this is a success.
Yeah, no, this and if the pages, I think if you've got it in front of you, these are the how Virginia puts. If you notice in their scale, it says green and yellow is the basis for the 71%, the 82%, the 89%. These are the actual metrics by which they determine whether a project is in that green or yellow. So the four slides that follow are just the relative for each of those four performance measures. So it helps you get a sense of how it is that they're describing something as like going pretty well versus not.
I do like the idea of having the good with the bad, because if something gets put off because for any number of reasons, it needs to be measured about what's your overall score.
Right. And you put something off, it's in theory, probably because you're doing something else instead.
Yeah.
And the question that you all have to, have the information to answer is, are we content with that trade-off that just occurred? And, like so many things in the legislature, it's often you don't really learn about it unless someone complains to you, or some member of the House or Senate says, what happened to that project in my district? Because my town manager's mad because it's not moving forward. And it turns out it's because something else got bumped up for some reason. But if you don't know about it, it's all trying to scramble to explain it after the fact. So we had two items in the audit that were directed directly to the legislature. This first one, the legislature responded in part to this recommendation. So it responded in part with two caveats. This was an attempt to get the 10G report to include more projects that had changes since what you guys had approved. What you did do was moved to 75% from 100% cost change in a 1-year period. So that was a change which might capture a few more projects. We had suggested a lower threshold for notification and that it include projects that had increased in such a cost, even if it had been over multiple years, not just a year to year, so that you don't have a project that kind of keeps inching along, gaining, say, 25% cost each year. By the end, it looks like nothing like what you saw in the first place. Just so that you're getting a better picture of what's going on. A way to achieve this in part is when you look at the transportation program and you see the specific projects, you know, with the boxes. The comment box often doesn't, I mean, you can't write a novel about every single project. AOT is not going to come in and have a treatise on each project. But where there has clearly been some drag on schedule or cost, there's a simple opportunity to have a little bit more clarity about what's gone on in those comment boxes. Occasionally, and I think even in the Killington one, there's some reference to recent bidding issues and cost pressures, but it doesn't explain the 12-year slippage on the schedule.
When you look in the transportation program for that project, there's nothing. Where that information came from was because of the 10G reporting that Matt did to you. It was last week that where he informed you of what's going on with these projects.
The second one, this is what Jonathan had already referred to, when projects are getting pushed aside in favor of another project in the transportation program, one that's authorized to be furthered. We had found, and I remember talking to the committee in its earlier iteration back in 23, that AOT wasn't directly notifying the legislature as it was required to. And I think that there was a bit of a misunderstanding on AOT's part that they thought that this had to be some very formal process of notification. And what we were saying is it can be as simple as an email to the committees that just says, look, project X is getting, shelved for a bit in favor of project Y for this reason. And that would be good because then it at least gives you the ability to say, that makes sense. Okay, no questions. We're good. Or, well, wait a sec, we really felt strongly about that project for whatever reason. We're talking about paving now. It could apply to any other area of the transportation program that has that flexibility at the agency level. So right now, the other issue is that the 10G report doesn't show, it shows about cost, but it does not show anything about schedule slippage. So that would be another opportunity to provide better notification for you all.
Maybe write in the book, what year did it first get in the book? And what was the original?
I was just thinking, why wouldn't it be right in the book?
Yeah.
On a 2-page report saying here's the projects that are delayed, here's the ones that are on time, and have it in the front of the book.
Yeah, and the ABS, there's a bill that's in the institutions committee that came over from the House committee that now deals with IT issues, and the project dashboard that ADS uses. One of the things that we encouraged them was to include the original cost and schedule and the current cost and schedule. That way, you could actually get the complete picture of how things started, where they're at. And similarly, as we said here, it's not about saying ABS has done a bad job. It's about saying, what did we think we were getting? Now that things have changed, where's the project stand today? And it's not easy to do that if you just see the current,
It does have the year added in here. Now that I see that.
If it has.
The program. The year was added in the program, so I'm looking at one that was Cavendish Rail Project, but that was the year added in 2017. I'm thinking you might get done in 2026. So it's been a long time, but at least it does say that you can see.
But,
yeah. So then the question is like, if it's in 2017 and it assumes like a modest amount of, the PE phase, it still doesn't communicate necessarily whether
What
the
happened
project
to
has,
But-
whether the project's been pushed back or faced,
Sounds like
you know,
a fail.
barriers.
And the problem with that is they're all spread all through the book.
Yeah.
If there was a dashboard at the beginning saying this many projects are on time, this many projects have been, it kind of the green, the
Yeah.
yellow, the red, and you just had, it doesn't have to be that long.
That's right. And ADS is a good, I'll send you all the link to the ADS dashboard because it's something, whereas ADS maintains it in real time, like throughout the year. And once a week it's updated. And if the project has any changes, they tweak the numbers. For the purposes we're talking about here, it doesn't really require that level of granularity. It could be the once a year inclusion in the transportation program.
I frankly would rather have a dashboard in the front of the book and maybe periodic emails through the year to the
Right.
committee than the 10G report.
Yeah, it's more practical, I think.
Yes. Go ahead.
Just one point I want to make and reiterating why I wanted the auditor to come is we are in a new structure as a legislature when it comes to transportation. We have two new chairs on the Senate side and the House side. And I think we have an opportunity during this time of change to potentially make positive improvements to the type of information we're receiving so that we can make better informed decisions. And I just wanted to note that as we're changing the guard, I think that this is a really good year or biennium to consider making or suggesting changes so that we can have better informed decision making. So put that out there.
Go ahead.
On the first I think it's the first recommendations, one slide back. And with your experience, Mr. Ash, on this committee, what do you think would be the result of this? Like, I understand the recommendation because like more information is almost always better, but
Well,
I'm kind of having a hard time to think of what I would do with it.
so I've sat in this room, I've sat with Senator Whiteside and and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, I've had the parade of AOT people come in and speak about their section.
Right.
And I never for a moment thought that they were not all working hard towards the mission of the agency, right? That said, I don't know that I was frequently in a position to ask good questions about how well things were actually going. It was typical that when we would latch on to a specific project, it's because something catastrophic had gone wrong. There was remember the bridge project, which Senator Brennan, you'll know, remember the bridge with all the contractor, there were some irregularities about what was going on. You find out about wrinkles like that. But in terms of, are we getting the best value for this limited money? You know, we wish we had way more money for paving projects and all the other divisions of the Agency of Transportation. It's not always easy to say, are they doing a good job? Right? Are these projects being designed as quickly as they could be? If they're using outside consultants, is there anything that we should know about whether that's going well? Is there a difference if we use outside consultants versus internal people? Are there any differences that are happening in different, AOT regional offices? Like what's going on out there? So I hear the underpinning of the question is you don't just want pieces of paper telling you more stuff because that's not really helpful. But to use the ADS example, it was, I think, an eye opener for when we released our report, when JITALK and other committees that have had some oversight of IT projects realized how little they knew about the very projects that year after year they had advocated for. Projects, some of which had been catastrophic failures, but they had no idea because no one had alerted. There was no trigger to say, just to put it in front of you to say, there's a reason I'm getting this. Something's not going according to the original plan. Is there a good reason? Or do I need to dig in further?
That's going to up to the committee's responsibility, and maybe the House, they have more time where they go through each 10G report and say like, okay, why was this one more? Why was this one more? Why was this?
Yeah.
Which we don't do here.
I
At
sus-
least
I
I
sus-
haven't done.
I suspect the Killington project, as one example, is I bet the Killington project each year, AOT has probably come in and given a straight face explanation. Killington project is back and we expect this year to be the year. It's like being a Red Sox fan. And then you look back and say, wait a second, every year they thought they were appropriating it and the project was moving forward. And here we are 12, 13 years later talking about this is going to be the year.
Right.
At a certain point, it allows you to say, is it really going to be the year? And if not, like what's really going on here? And as I say again, and I'm not just saying Jeremy's here, this is not about making the agency look
Right.
bad or make them look good. It's about allowing you to know what's really going on.
One piece that I was surprised to not see in your report, and I think we're spending a lot of time talking about the agency and how the agency is doing. I actually want to know more about how the companies bidding on our projects are doing. And I did see a lot in relation to connecting the dots with specific companies or providers. And I'm wondering maybe you have other information about that? Or, because that's the main thing is I'm assuming it's not that the agency is delaying a project necessarily, or there's issues. It's that we have limited bidders and few companies and potentially not a market that is moving as quickly as we might want. So I don't know if you have any reflections on that, or if even having a comment, like I'd love to see who the company is, like on each of the projects that's being contracted out to do work if it's not the agency. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
So every project we looked at was bid out. We looked, were they getting multiple bids? So that it translates a lot of controls, because there's a big concern, just not just within our state, but federally. You know, something they have to look for is bid rigging. And so they have processes where they look for it. And again, when they develop they don't develop a single estimate. The estimate continually gets refined, their cost estimate. The one that they go to bid with, that's the one they compare. Did our bids come in within a reasonable amount? I may have this wrong, Jeremy could say, but I believe they look for, is it within 10% of what they estimated? And we did a quick scan. It wasn't really in our scope of our audit, but we were curious because we want to look, would bids come in, like the winning bid would be really close, but then would the other two bids be really off?
Yeah.
You know, and we didn't see any of that.
Okay.
So, but again, that wasn't the focus of the audit, but the projects we did look at, we want to see, because the bid rigging, you need to have the company A say, okay, I'll take this one, and I'll let you take the next one. And then they could inflate the prices that way. But they, again, VTran can speak better to their process. We had a general understanding of things that they do to look for that. And again, we didn't see an issue when it came to the construction side. Like once they got to the final, this is how we're going to do it. Everything seemed to go very smooth. It's just like with the Killington project, we're still not there yet. And that's where we're saying you should look at the entirety of paving project, and the planning part is where there needs to be improvement, because if we know cost is oftentimes tied to extending it out.
Yeah.
And-
That's a really good point.
And the AOT website that has I think it includes all the bid documents still. So at the time we did the audit, when you look in at individual projects, I mean, you see the bid sheets with the names of the company and the amount that they bid. And, I just remember scanning through for general interest and seeing, companies I'd never heard of in some parts of the state, because they're less likely to be, say, in northwestern Vermont. So you see a little bit of that variety, but we didn't have concerns going into the project about the integrity of the competitive bidding process, and nothing stood out that would have disrupted that belief. It is the nature of the competitive bidding process is the best qualified entity with the lowest price gets the bid, unless some other circumstance pops up. So we didn't run into a problem there, but I do encourage you to look at that, because it's very, I think for most taxpayers and hopefully for legislators, it's a very encouraging thing to see that level of transparency, which is typical for public entities. The federal government would do it similarly, I think.
Thank you. That's actually really reassuring. I came out strong at one point when the pavers came and presented to us, because I think there was at least some buzz in our area that there may be some, when individuals drive around with fancy cars who work for construction companies, I think it tips people off to feel a certain way, and the accuracy of an anecdotal perspective compared to a competitive bid process that's been reviewed by the auditor is a little different. So thank you for that.
Sure. So with that, we're always here to serve. Let us know how we can be of further service to you all.
So I just have a question about the process. So do you get compensated for this somehow, or is it just in the auditor's budget?
Oh, we get bonuses that are it's a sweet deal. No, so the auditor's the auditor's budget is a little funky. It's an internal service fund to state government, so I won't bore you with the formula, but basically each department pays a pro rata share based on their revenues and expenses. And so that all funds the
So you have
general
funding
activities.
to do all of this. You don't
Yes.
have to.
Correct.
Yeah.
In our
Charge.
normal.
Internal
Okay.
service type funds.
All right.
I would just say to you, they do get paid more than we do.
Oh, the individual.
That is,
Oh,
that-
I think everybody did.
that is true. That is true. I will say there's just for general interest. Our budget does have one eccentricity, which is that the legislature, and I know that Senator Westman and I were on finance at the time, back in 2011 or 12, when Auditor Salmon did the first set of audits of TIF districts. It was a mess. There were 4, Newport, Winooski, Milton, and Burlington. And the result of that was a desire to never have such a mess again. And so the following year, legislation was passed, which created this schedule of audits that the auditor's office would be required to do. So that previously hadn't been the case. Those are paid for directly by the municipality out of their TIF district. So that's a portion of our budget, which is actually directly paid for through the TIP program.
Okay.
But
No,
everything else-
that's good to know. Actually.
It was in fact, it's surprising to me, Milton had the most interesting test.
Well, they had 2 interesting ones. Colchester almost had one. There was a legislative showdown one year with Jim Condon over Colchester.
Oh,
And Colchester got it, authorization, but then I think elected not to.
Yeah, but Colchester's doesn't go from the northern border to the southern border and down.
Well, there's lots of eccentric things, like the Burlington waterfront goes downtown.
Yeah, I know, yeah, but anyways. This is very interesting in particularly the questions I've been asking and quite timely, the questions I've been asking joint fiscal are in the general fund, we've been talking about how we would deal with information around the cutting of projects at the federal level. And for us, we have a whole group of projects that are on hold, and we have no idea what's going to happen with them at the federal level at this point, and how if a certain percentage of projects goes, how will we be alerted and be at least a part of the process to overview what decisions are made within the agency around that, and this kind of in some way
It's a relationship, sure.
it hits at that same area.
Definitely, for sure.
We have a number of quite large projects that have been put on hold.
I'll send you the ADS link just so you can see what a different branch of state government is, how they're doing it. And but for some reason I'm trying to, oh, actually, if you don't mind, I'll pull it up just real quick.
And we're
Yeah,
working on
pull it
that.
up and.
Yeah.
In institutions,
we
we're
take a
working
look
on
at-
that.
Let me just pull it up real
Yeah.
fast so you can take a look.
Always steal good ideas.
There we go.
Oh,
It's just a dashboard, which I.
You know, they use a
Personally, I'd
similar-
rather have that than the 10G report.
Similar theme here that we saw in the Virginia one with the green, yellow, red, and they have their own explanation of what constitutes green, yellow, red. As I say, this is being updated once a week, so that might not be quite what you hope
No,
for.
it,
But this, when we, in the two committees now with jurisdiction over IT, it, you know, what they've changed as a result of our audit is the initial estimate of the cost versus the current, which was missing. And so this is a brief aside, but what different from, this is not a reflection on how AOT has presented things. ADS, when they had a project, let's say they said, we've got this project, it's starting today, it's going to be done in 1 year, it's going to cost $1 million. If 11 months later, the project was going to cost $10 million instead of 1 and take 3 more years, they would change the information being presented to say that the project was expected to be completed out in the future for $11 million. So you never understood that the goalposts were moving. So everything was being considered on time and on budget because they just kept changing it when they found out that the price was going up and that the schedule was being pushed back. So that was an example where it was actually, it was unintentional. I don't imply that there was like a deliberate attempt to deceive, but anyone looking at it would say that is not what's really been going on. And with AOT, as I say, that snapshot at the beginning of the year when they present the transportation program is probably sufficient. So it doesn't
I don't see why that wouldn't fit in the. front of
put
this
Jeremy
book.
off in some, you know, like never ending.
I actually in here, I don't see why it wouldn't show up. Be nice if it was showed up in the front of this book and maybe quarterly, if the agency emailed that to committee members, it would be. Go ahead.
yeah, this kind of information is really important. And I think it's more helpful for everyone if the agency or the department finds it helpful.
Yeah.
Because they will have other metrics. I mean, of course, they care about time and, you know, on budget, but there's other metrics that they care about. And it's just important to make sure that they find value in this. Also, because management wants to do a good job. And the likelihood of it being updated and accurate and usable is much greater if the agency is part of that conversation and the design.
Go ahead.
That goes to our recommendation 1 in the report. And we'll talk about the shared development non-performance measures.
Yeah.
By capturing the reasons for variances in our estimates. We talk about establishing baselines because as Tim pointed out, a performance measure is only as good as its baseline. If you change the baseline every year, it's not a very good performance measure. But then if you're by identifying the reasons for it, it then informs your future estimates. It becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. Which is what we're advocating.
And then we can also notice the wins, not just the losses.
Right.
And that's important too, to show where things are going well.
Yeah, it's 90% a good report and all we do is focus on the bad 10%. It's not really.
It's no fun. This is supposed to be fun.
Let's wait. You wait till I leave to tell me that?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would, I think, what we'll do is we'll go offline for a minute